What's going on, everybody? It is official. We are less than a month away from the National. Now, even if you're not attending the National, there is going to be so much content from it, so many pickups from it, so many great videos from it. It is going to be enjoyable. Now, I've mentioned a few times the last few years I haven't been able to go because my daughter has a soccer tournament, a big regional soccer tournament that same week every year. But this year, the tournament is a week earlier, so I get to attend. I'm going to be sharing kind of my schedule, where I'll be as we get a little bit closer. I'm kind of getting that all squared away. And I look forward to meeting a bunch of people who I have not yet met in person. That is going to be the highlight of the show for sure. But first things first, today we have a Q&A video. And I love these Q&A videos because I just like talking about ideas and concepts and cards and strategies. To me, that's a lot of the fun, is the drive to and from the card show at times is almost as fun as the card show itself. And that's sort of what I think these Q&As are, is it's just an opportunity to talk about different topics and different ideas and ways to collect. So I have some great questions again this week. A lot of the questions from last week that weren't used went into the Sunday episode of Off Topic that Darren and I did on the For Collectors channel for Hobby Palooza. I got some great questions this week. We're going to look at 5 of them. Always remember, if I don't use your question the week that you ask it, please ask it again the following week. It's not that I don't like your question. It's just that I do 5 a week. So if you've not asked a question before, I would encourage you to do that. I think that, it's fun to participate. And this is a great way to be a participant. And this is one of the main reasons I do the Q&A, so that everybody can participate in this. You may not be a person who posts videos on YouTube, but that doesn't mean that you can't be a YouTube participant. So please take a second down below in the comment section. Simply type out your question that you would like to hear my thoughts on for the following week. And as always, remember, just because I have some thoughts on a topic doesn't mean that they're the right thoughts. They're just my thoughts as they stand right now. And have I had my opinion changed? A lot. My opinion changes all the time. My interests change all the time. So nothing is ever set in stone. Let's go ahead, though, and take a look at our first question right here. Question for next week. I've seen a phenomenon start to become more prevalent since PSA grading has become more strict in the last year or so. I've been seeing more and more people, dealers, selling on consensus eye appeal rather than grade comps, selling a nice 4 for the price of 5. If we were using aesthetics of the market to determine these values, what is the point of grading other than protection and authentication? I'm curious what your thoughts are, as I remember you in a card show video asking for a discount on an older slab. I strictly collect PSA singles, and when I see things like this, it's difficult to blow off those "it's all a scam" guys. Okay, love this question. This is a really great question. But before we go too far into it, I do feel like we should take a look at a few cards and see what you're referring to. Because there are a lot of people who feel that over the last, 30 years that PSA has been grading, their standards seem to be getting tougher. And why are they getting tougher? That's debatable. Are they actually getting tougher? Also debatable. The company says they're not getting tougher. The president, the CEO says, no, our standards have never changed. On paper, that's true. They haven't really changed. But it does seem like they're getting tougher, If you don't want to take my word for it, I don't blame you. I don't send a ton of cards to PSA, so I'm probably not the best person to vouch for the fact that the grading standards have gotten tougher. Chris Sewell has one of probably the biggest channel that covers a lot of vintage cards on it. Baseball collector, investor, dealer, in that order. And he did a video recently about how the grading standards seem to be getting tougher and how he got an order back and was just baffled by the grades. So first, before I answer this, let's take a quick look at some comparisons of some cards that were slabbed a while ago versus some cards that were slabbed recently. Let's look at these first. All right, so we've got two Willie Mays cards. Both are 1962 tops. Both are a PSA 4. I know that the logo covered up the grade, but I can promise you, that it says a 4 underneath there. Now, the one on the left is an older graded card. Now, the serial number is a clue, but they are not fully sequential, unfortunately. So it's just a clue. It's not the be all and end all. I also know that the one on the left was graded longer ago because the font has changed. The positioning of the font has changed. There's no lighthouse logo. It's clear that the one on the left is an older slab. Now, when we look at the one on the left, look at this corner here on the top left-hand corner. We've also got this fat wrinkle going through the card here. We got this big smudge right here next to the S in SF. The centering top to bottom is not great. The one on the right has better color, has better centering, has better corners. It's pretty much better. I mean, you might make the argument that the one on the left is a little bit of a clearer image here on his face. And it's hard to know, is that the picture and the angle at which the picture was taken, or is that the card? But I mean, come on, these cards aren't close. The one on the right is just significantly better, but they received the same grade. Yet if you ask Nat Turner, he says that the grading standards haven't gotten tougher. I mean, he's been asked, and he said, no, grading standards are the same. But they also talk about how they use different technologies now in their grading. So how could you use different technologies and it not be tougher? Changing the grading process, by definition, changes the grading standards. So here's just the first example. Let's look at the next one. Now, the next card we've got here is a 1954 Topps Hank Aaron rookie card, also in a PSA 4. So when we look at these two cards, the one on the left, let's look at that one first. You got lots of roller marks here. You got roller marks here, here, here. It's kind of faded. There's this big, I don't know if that's a printer dot or paper loss there. The corner is really rounded here on the top right. It's got all sorts of issues on the top left and bottom right. The one on the right has better color, significantly better corners. Centering is even a little bit better. Again, this is an older slab. This one has the serial number, it starts with a 9, and it's in the Lighthouse logo. Most likely, this was graded within the last year or so. There are some straggler serial numbers from years and years ago that have 9 serial numbers. Again, they're not always sequential, but it's a good clue. The one on the left has the number and the name of the grade on the same line. The one on The one on the right is so much better than the one on the left. But they haven't changed the grading standards. Right. The next one. We've got a 1955 Topps Roberto Clemente rookie card in a 5. Again, the one on the top, number grade and name of grade on the same line. That's a clue that it's an older grade. A leading 0 and then the 8 tells us it's an older serial number. The one on the bottom has a lighthouse logo, starts with a 6. It's a late 6th grade. This is probably maybe 2 years ago, I would guess it was graded. Centering is a little bit better on the top. Color seems better on the bottom. Look at this. I mean, this is not just a rough cut, which I don't mind a rough cut. This looks almost like a damaged cut. There's a ding right here. Top left corner is not that great for a 5. I mean, if you sent the card on the top in, there's something going on up here. If you sent the card on the top in, there's a little mark here, little mark here. If you sent the card on the top in now, you think that'd get a 5? I don't think it would get a 5. Got some marks up in here. A lot of stray little marks on here. The one on the bottom, definitely better corners, definitely better color. I mean, the one on the bottom looks like a 5. One on the top to me looks more like a 4, 3.5, or a 4. But the grading standards haven't changed. Again, when somebody makes that statement in a question and then people go, oh, whoa, you can't just make that statement. I agree. We have to look at the cards to evaluate them and look at some examples. So let's look at some more. Now, this one is interesting. This one is really interesting to me. Both of them have similar flips and similar serial numbers. But look at the cards. My goodness. Look at this corner. Look at this corner. Look at this corner. I mean, I guess the centering on the right's a little better, right? Picture is really clear here. But the one on the left, the corners are so much better. I don't know. I guess maybe somebody would, I don't know. That corner on the top left and top right are pretty weak to me. I don't know. Maybe the one on the right is a 3, but I think the one on the right, I think a 3 is harsh on this card personally. That seems more like a 4 to me. This may be even more like a 2.5, 2, maybe a 2. I mean, look at this corner down here. And so you say, well, Greg, you said that the grading has gotten harder, but these were both graded recently. Yeah. And that's also why I also say grades are an opinion, and grades are not a noun, they're an adjective. They describe the card in one person's opinion or maybe two, because I don't think the universal card community, I mean, this has a little mark right here, a little mark right here. I don't think the universal card community would look at this card on the right and say it's a 3 and the card on the left is also a 3. So it's not just that card grading seems to be getting tougher. It's also that even the current grades don't always seem to line up. And I know there's going to be someone out there go, well, how do you know there's not a little surface wrinkle on the one on the left? You're not showing us the back of the card, Greg. There could be an issue on the back of the card. I get that. Now, I could show you 1,000 examples like this, though. If there was just one, then sure. And that's one of the reasons why the other ones were fives and fours, where you're going to be a lot less likely to have wrinkles. I tried to pick more mid grades where that wouldn't come into play, but I don't know. I just felt the need to show some examples as part of this question. Okay, so first off, I think those newer grades tended to be a lot nicer cards than the older grades. People who've been doing this hobby for a while tend to mostly agree that, generally speaking, newer graded cards have harsher grades than older graded cards. Now, I do want to be very clear. That does not mean that every old 6 or old 7 or old 5 is no longer worthy of that grade. Some are. But because it's not a perfect science, because it's a human process, there are definitely outliers in all directions. So after seeing that, I think, again, there are a lot of examples I could show. That's just a handful of them. It does feel like they've gotten tougher. And again, like I said a minute ago, how could they not? They're using technologies now that weren't at their disposal in the late 1990s. And so they're using technologies they didn't used to have. How could they not be tougher? So let's go to the question, though. What do I think about dealers and people selling cards that are in 4s as 5s? I think it's fantastic. I think it's one of the best things that has started to happen in the hobby. I mean, what is happening when we do that is we are taking the power back. See, when we went to grading, what happened is your opinion, that was secondary. The overall, without a doubt, the most important thing that dictated a card's value was the number on the slab from the grading company, specifically PSA. So they came in with their opinion, and their opinion overruled everybody's opinion. In the market, that's what the prices were based on. So now what we've got is, if people are selling cards that are in 4s for 5 prices and people are buying those cards, how is that a bad thing? That's a good thing. That means that people are using the grade for what it is, an opinion. It's a suggestion. That grade is assigned a number. That is not a noun. It is an adjective. It is one or two people's opinions. So whenever you see less power in the value of a card for the grading company and more power in our own eyes, that means we're getting control back of the hobby. It is no longer controlled by the graders. It is controlled by the buyers. So I think that is a fantastic thing. And I've seen it too. And I've done it. There have been cards that I think were undergraded, and I paid over the comps of that grade because I thought it deserved a higher grade. And if on a technical scale, it deserved that grade, great. I mean, who cares what a comp is for a 4 if the card to me looks like a 6? Who cares? What a card is worth is what somebody is willing to pay for it. And if I'm willing to pay more than other people are willing to pay for it, then great, I get the card. So As far as the other part of your question is, it's hard to say that the people that think that grading is a scam, it's hard to blow them off. I never blew them off. I don't think that the people who say that grading is a scam are necessarily out to lunch. I think there's validity in it. When there's a card that you can send in and get a grade, and then you crack it, and you send it back in, and it comes back a grade or 2 grades differently, I mean, there are some flaws in the issues. There are some issues going on there. Now, do I think it's a scam? I don't think it's a scam because it does use some criteria to give you a range of the quality of the card. I mean, rarely is a 9 going to get a 3, and rarely is a 3 going to get a 9. But when a card gets a 3, it's probably more like somewhere between a 2 and a 4. And when a card gets an 8, it's probably really between a 7 and a 9. It's not like the grader doesn't bring anything to the table. They are using tools, they are using techniques to give the potential buyer some range of how nice the card is. If it has a crease, it has a maximum price. If it has, a wrinkle, if it has a print defect, if it has bad centering. So it does provide a utility, and it does provide protection. And it also provides that range. Now, to me, what a card being graded does is it really accomplishes 3 things. It acknowledges the authenticity of the card. So it's now been authenticated. That's a good thing. That has some value. It protects the card. And I think that provides some value. If you like the looks of the holders, if you like the protection that they provide, that is a utility as well. The other thing that it does is it makes it so much easier for whoever ends up acquiring the cards to get an idea of what the card is, what the approximate condition is, and they're able to identify the value of it. If all your cards are ungraded and they're just in binders, somebody who inherits it, they have no idea what it's worth. None. And it's very difficult to price it because the range is enormous. I have some friends. I have a high school friend who contacted me not that long ago. And her husband inherited this collection from her dad. And all of the cards are ungraded. All of them. And they're like, what's this worth? And I'm like, they brought it over and we looked through it. Mostly vintage stuff. Late 50s, early to late 60s. We looked through all the cards and I'm like, well, it's going to be somewhere between here and here. And they're like, that's a big range. And I'm like, I know. It just kind of depends. So you can get a range and even the most seasoned expert in the hobby, they can get a range of what those cards could potentially sell for. But if they're ungraded, they could be off by a fair amount. And grading kind of takes a lot of the different factors into play and gives you a pretty good idea of its approximate condition and therefore its approximate value. So I don't think it's bad that people are buying cards above the graded price comps. I think it's good. I think that's a good thing for the hobby. It means we're getting control back. And it's no longer the grading companies who run this thing. So I'm looking to buy a 57 Bart Starr. On eBay, the card is around $700, PSA 4 or 5. At the National, there will be many copies of this. Since I can trade or negotiate at the National, do you think I should wait for the National? I would like to have this card by December of 2024. Okay, great question, right? Timely question. National's less than a month away. A lot of us are card collectors. We want to collect cards. We have the certain cards we have our eyes out for. We have the different auction houses that maybe we follow and look for those cards on. And so the question is, do I buy the card now? Or do I wait until the National where I might get a better deal or find a better one or whatever? Well, what I like about this question is you gave a specific card. By giving a specific card, it makes it so much easier to answer the question. So let me start there and then I'll generalize. And again, this is just my take. This is certainly not the only way to approach this. A 57 Bart Starr. So this is the Bart Starr rookie card. It's a beautiful card, okay? And it's an expensive card, but it's not a particularly rare card. You could go on eBay right now, type in 57 Bart Starr, check the box in like SGC and PSA 345, and there will be probably at least 10 to 20 of them will come up. So my thought process is you can't really negotiate on eBay. And if you're planning on attending the National anyway, I would say hold off, because of those 10 to 20 that are currently for sale on eBay, most of them will still be there in a month. And say a couple of them sell. Say 5 of them sell. There will probably be 2 or 3 more added to eBay listings. So if it was me and you're thinking about trading and you're thinking about trying to negotiate a good deal, on a card like that, I would probably wait for the National. I would go to the National, I'd look through the room, if you can work a great deal, if you can go ahead and make a trade to offset the price, I think that's a great move. And then if you get to the National, you just don't see the right one, the one that fits your eye, then you go back to eBay or the other auction houses and you go from there. So with a card that's not super rare, you want a 59 Topps Bob Gibson, I'd say the same thing. A 54 Topps Al Kaline, same thing. I would say be patient, go to the National, try to get a good deal. And if it doesn't happen there, then go home and go take your money, hang on to your money, and look on eBay. Now, if the card is a super rare card, maybe you're looking for, and when we talk super rare cards, that could go in a million places. But let's say you want a PSA 7, 52 Topps Jackie Robinson. Those don't come up for auction that often. And when they do, they may not all suit your eye. Maybe the centering or something on the picture or the color may seem off to you. So if a card like that rarely comes up in that kind of grade, or a card that's just rare, like a Tharps Ty Cobb card, you should probably go after it while there's one available. And just go to the National and hang out. Hang out with friends, look at the cards, treat it like a day at the museum or a couple of days at the museum with friends. Because to me, I don't think that you can pass up the rare opportunity when it arrives. Just like, if you get to the second table at the show and that card shows up there, I think you probably want to buy it. But if it's a 57, Bart Starr at the second table of the show in a 4, you're probably going to see another, 10 to 20 of them. So dependent on what it is that you're going for and the rarity of it and the rarity in that grade and how frequently that card comes up, is definitely the main factor in determining, do you go and buy it now or do you wait? If you want a Rickey Henderson Topps rookie card, I don't think you need to buy one on eBay, because there are about 10 of those that list every single day. So you are not going to miss your opportunity for that card. So that's kind of my take. It's very dependent on the card. In this case, with the 57 Topps Bart Starr, I'd probably wait for the National, try to work a deal, try to make a trade. And if that falls through, then you always have eBay to fall back on. Follow-up question. You talked about card values, but what autographed cards, and maybe autos in general, when a player dies, the possibility for more autographs is gone. How would you go about collecting autographs of players who are no longer with us? Okay, so last week there was some discussion about when a player passes away, what happens to their card values. And I pulled up some charts and I looked at it with everybody and I said, you know what tends to happen is there tends to be a spike as they're in the news, as people are remembering their greatness. And then things tend to level off a little bit back to kind of where they were. So this follow-up question is, okay, same thing, but with autographs. Now, I think that, the answer I give to pretty much every question is, well, it depends. But it depends. If we're talking about a guy like Mickey Mantle signed a ton of autographs. Tons and tons and tons and tons. He died younger than he should have, but he still lived fairly long. There's a lot of his autographs out there in the general population. Willie Mays lived a long time. And Willie Mays went to a lot of card shows. I personally saw Willie Mays at a lot of card shows signing. So he's got tons of autographs in circulation. So, and then also on top of that, yes, okay, Willie Mays is, now that he's passed, there are no longer going to be any more autographs. But, how many autographs do you think he signed in the last 2 years? It's not like he was pumping out autographs anymore. His autograph total in population really started to slow dramatically probably over the last 5 years or so, right? So it's not like it went from huge production of them to over. Now, if that was the case, then I would say getting their autograph sooner rather than later might be a good move. For example, when Kobe Bryant passed away, that was very unexpected. And he was very young. And he hadn't really had the opportunity to do a lot of those appearances and a lot of those signings. So a Kobe Bryant autograph, where all of a sudden there are no more of them, that is a card I would go, I better get one now, right when that happened, because they're not going to be coming down in price. Like, the legend of Kobe Bryant is massive and will probably only grow, and there aren't that many of his autographs out there. So there is going to be a feeding frenzy for his autograph. But if you look at a guy like, Wade Boggs, who signs through the mail all the time, tons and tons and tons of his autographs out there, right? Juan Marichal, Bob Feller. Bob Feller signed at tons of card shows for years and years and years. And so a Bob Feller autograph, even though he's an all-time great pitcher, you can get a Bob Feller autograph pretty cheap. And when he passed away, it's not like they skyrocketed, because, even now we just lost Brooks Robinson, but he signed through the mail for years and signed tons and tons and tons of autographs. His price didn't go through the roof when he passed away. So it depends on the player. It depends on their age. It depends on if it was an expected passing or an unexpected passing. It depends on the total population of autographs out there. So it depends. But Willie Mays, I don't think his autograph prices are going to spike up because, and they might temporarily, but then I think they'd come back to normal just because of the amount of the population out there. Just like Mickey Mantle's, even though the population ended, there's still so many. The supply is so large. The fact that the supply isn't going to get larger than the already large amount that there is, I don't think is, a dramatic change in price. Question from last week. You mentioned in your short-winded video that one day you would narrow down your collection to 100 cards. When you buy cards now at the National, online, and other card shows, are these cards that are going to be in your final 100? And how do you go about determining which ones you're going to keep for the long term? With all of the cards you already do have, since you collect pre-war, vintage, some modern, various sports, and non-sport too. Yeah, this is a great question. If I think that a lot of us kind of have an idea of the size of the collection that they want. Some people want a massive collection, and some people are more into a smaller collection. And there's not a right or wrong answer, obviously. It's completely up to each person. I think somebody could potentially have an amazing collection and have 10 cards in it. And we're going to talk a little bit about the same topic on the next question, which is along these lines. But to answer this, the goal of wanting to eventually have about 100 cards in my collection, it definitely makes buying cards more difficult. Because I think about that. I'm like, okay, here's a cool card that I like and it's $30. Am I going to have this for the next 30 years? If I'm not going to have it for the next 30 years, why am I going to buy it? If it's not going to be one of those 100, why buy it? Because I'm just going to sell it to narrow it down to my eventual 100. So that line of thinking definitely, for me at least, makes it more difficult to buy, which is your question. Is it tougher to go to a card show and buy? Yeah, I mean, a few years ago, I'd go to a card show and I might come home with 10 different cards. And now I might go to a card show and I might come home with 1 card or 2 cards or no cards. I have gone to shows and not bought anything. And, there's a big card show coming up this weekend. In fact, if you're in the Northern California area, it's probably the card show of the summer. It's going to have about 300 tables. I'm going to be there with my dad. We're going to set up a table. I'll be there on Saturday and Sunday. The show is Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It's possible I don't buy anything. And now it's possible that I do. It's possible I buy a few things. But I do think about this as I'm like, well, if I'm looking at a card, I'll go, well, am I going to want this in 10 years? Am I going to want this in 5 years? If I'm not going to want it in 5 years, kind of what's the point? Like, why buy it? And it's a valid question. Now, the other thing, though, is my mind is always changing. I change my mind on what I want most, what I like, what I don't like. There have been cards I've said, I don't like that card, and now I want that card. There have been cards that I bought, and then 6 months later I sell because I don't want them anymore. So right now I'm saying, yeah, I think my collection maybe of 100 cards, maybe 200 cards is where I'm at the moment. But it's very, very possible that goes out the window and I become more of a broad bulk collector than a narrower collector. It's possible I say, I just think about 20 would be great. So I do think about all this stuff, but there also comes a point where you can overthink it and just go, well, that card's not going to be in my ultimate 100, so I'm not going to buy it. And then you just don't buy anything. And then what fun is the hobby and collecting in the hobby if you're never buying anything? Like, it's fun to go get a new card for the collection and add it in. That's fun, right? So I guess my answer is I don't know. I do think about it. And I do lean toward, at the moment, that's where I'm at. The moment I'm thinking about 100 cards. So when I'm at a card show, I do think about, oh, that's a cool card, but come on, is that going to be one of the 100? If it's not going to be one of the 100, what's the point? I'll just get something else or not get anything. It makes it more difficult and it makes it more expensive. So I think the biggest thing that it affects, the biggest thing that it affects is, I'm a lot more particular about what I buy, not just the condition or the look of it, but also what cards in particular. Because before I would go, that's kind of cool, I'll get it. That's kind of cool, I'll get it. And now I kind of do that a little bit less. So, I'm going to do a card show video on the show this weekend. And I won't be shocked if I buy 5 cards. And I won't be shocked if I buy 0 cards. I have no idea how it's going to play out. So that's kind of, it does make it difficult though. And it does make me plan for shows more than I used to in the past to keep myself focused. Question. I've been collecting for the last 3 years and have accumulated a decent amount of valuable cards for the budget that I'm on. I mostly collect low to mid-grade superstars in grades 3 to 6. Should I sell off a lot of my collection for 1 card of each player? For example, I have around 10 Roberto Clemente cards worth around $2,000. Should I sell all of the cards I have of him to purchase a 1955 rookie and a PSA 3? I really have a strong interest in owning some bigger cards of players I never thought I'd be able to own. Now that I have enough cards to sell to get closer to my goals, it has become a reality, but might also be a struggle. Is it worth years of buying cards just to cash them all in for one? Would you sell off, let's say, 10 to 12 $200 cards for one $2,000 card? This is the question for collectors. This is the hardest question, is do I go quality or do I go quantity? I've been doing my channel now for, 20 months or 19 months or something. And I've done 2 or 3 videos on this exact question. And I go back and forth on it. And just like the question I just answered, it's like, well, I'm kind of leaning toward quality and more like 100 cards instead of a lot of different things. And that doesn't make that the right answer. That's where I'm at right now. And I absolutely reserve the right to potentially change my mind on that. It's sort of like, think of it like this. When you buy a house, when you buy your first house, you kind of buy a starter house, right? You kind of buy an affordable house. It'll make do for a while. And then some people buy a little bit of a nicer house and they kind of scale up a little, right? You take some of your assets that you have here, you take your bonus over here, you're making a little bit more money so you can afford a little bit of a bigger payment. You cash out the house that did its job for you, and then you scale up to a nicer house. And then maybe a few years go by and you make it look nicer and you kind of do some things, and then you scale up to a nicer house and you kind of work your way up to your forever house, right? It's kind of the same thing with cards. It's like, it's okay to scale up. There are cards right now in my collection that years ago I didn't think that I would ever scale up to. And there are cards that I think that I'll probably have at some point that right now seem completely out of reach. The cards that I acquired along the way, the deals that I, kind of worked on and did a great job of researching or maybe getting a good deal or maybe doing some packaging and some selling and some flipping. And what that does is it allows me to buy a bigger card. So I think the natural move, and if you look, and I could be wrong, but I think if you look around people in the hobby, most people kind of scale up. They go from buying, the most basic Hall of Famer up to the mid-tier Hall of Famer, up to the bigger Hall of Famer, up to the superstar. It's like they work their way up. And it kind of feels sometimes like you've turned your back on those cards if you decide to sell them to scale up. For example, you mentioned having about 10 Roberto Clemente cards, and you go, "Oh man, but I love these cards, and they were so fun to pick up." Yeah, and by working on those for a while, you are able to accumulate this dream card that never seemed possible in the rookie card, and those cards helped you get there. That doesn't mean that you've turned your back on those cards, because the other piece of it is you can always reacquire them. It's easier to reacquire the 1968 Clemente than it is to reacquire the 55 Clemente. So if you trade some of those for the bigger card, you package them together, you sell them, and you get the big one. It's not like you can't go back and get those. You can always go back and get them, and that's okay. But it would be hard to get the big card without utilizing those other cards. It's like if you just wanted to wait, if you wanted to wait to buy your dream house, and you just rent until you can afford your dream house, it might be a while. But if you get in the game, you get that starter house, you improve it, you sell it, you level up, and then you level up, and then you level up. I think you'll probably get to the dream house faster. And that entry-level house, that starter house, it helped you get there, and you appreciate it. But the ultimate goal was not the starter house. The ultimate goal was the dream house. Now, that's not to say that for some people, the 68 Clemente is not as good as the 55 Clemente. Some people are volume collectors. Some people want lots of variety. And that is absolutely fantastic. But what it sounds like from your question, from the question that I just read, it sounds to me like what you want are the big cards. And you're ready to level up. But you feel bad about leveling up. You feel bad about turning on those cards that helped you get there. I get it. I do get it. But they serve their purpose. If the original dream was not the 68 Clemente, it was the 55 Clemente, then I think taking the assets that you have acquired to get the ultimate goal that you want to acquire is probably what you should do. And if you ever say, you know what, I messed up, shouldn't have done that, you can always undo it. That's the beauty about cards, is they are a commodity that have a value attached to them. That 55 Clemente, you're not going to buy it and then tomorrow it's going to be worth $40. That's not going to happen. So you can always go, I liked having those other 10. You can sell and you can go back out and go get them. That's okay too. But it is absolutely one of the hardest questions in the hobby is, do you want to be quality or do you want to be quantity? But I do think when we all started this, we all started just acquiring what we could acquire. Just like that first starter house was all we could afford. We never dreamed we could get the dream house. But here we are in a position where now we can get the dream house. Kind of seems like we should go get it because it's the dream house. And if the dream card is now a possibility, then I think you should probably do it. Just my take. If you guys have a question for next week's episode, please do not hesitate to ask it. Simply down below in the comments, type out your question. I look forward to hearing what you all have to say. And remember, if you asked a question and I didn't answer it, it doesn't mean I don't like you. It doesn't mean I don't like your question. It just means I pick 5 each week. So ask it again in the comments below, and I'd be happy to feature it next week.